Nobody anticipated what would be discovered at James Mason's Beverly Hills house after his death in 1984. Millions of dollars worth of film reels were concealed behind fake walls. The big shock, however, wasn't that. A cassette tape bearing the label "Not Play" was discovered from the same property 10 years later. Mason's unfiltered opinions about Hollywood's most sinister secrets were captured on the 90-minute tape. Studio executives made an attempt to purchase it. Fortunes were offered by collectors. However, Mason's remarks against his well-known co-stars and the covert misdeeds of the industry were so shocking that they nearly vanished. James Mason was born in Huddersfield, West Yorkshire, on May 15, 1909. His father operated a prosperous wool firm that supplied exquisite cloth all across Europe, so his family was well-versed in the textile industry. His mother, who hailed from a well-educated Lancashire family, wished James a respectable career in architecture. Nevertheless, Mother recognized his talent for acting at a young age and discreetly set up elocution classes to help him soften his Yorkshire accent. The seeds for a life that would always be split between abiding by the rules and disobeying them were sown by that early combination of privilege, expectation, and covert encouragement. James received a scholarship at the age of 14 to attend Marlborough College, one of the best universities in England. However, life wasn't simple there. He suffered from a severe stammer that made him feel alone. When his acting teacher asked him to join the school's little theater club, everything changed. He was able to overcome his stammer thanks to the instruction, and the performance experience stoked his passion. Later, he wrote about the exuberance he experienced when reciting Shakespeare's lines, calling it exhilarating. He gained confidence and a sense of purpose from the stage. His parents intended him to pursue a secure career in architecture, and he did so when he enrolled at Cambridge in 1927. However, he was covertly performing in play after play with the Marlowe Society while he was in school, showing up in anything from contemporary verse drama to Greek tragedies. His father offered him a job in the family business in 1930, which would have ensured him a prosperous future. James declined. His father referred to his decision to join a London repertory theatre as crazy. The family was deeply divided as a result of the choice. For James, however, it was the instant he put the stage ahead of everything else. His early acting years were difficult. He occasionally performed in provincial halls that were only partially occupied when working with tiny touring companies. He once pawned his pocket watch to buy food because he was so short on cash. He even slept on chilly marble floors backstage. Everything began to alter when playwright J.B. After spotting him during an audition, Priestley gave him a part in the West End of London. He was hailed for the profundity of his performances and went from being a struggling actor to a critical success almost quickly. This was the first of many times James would use sheer willpower to pull himself back from the brink. Soon after, his private life attracted almost as much interest as his professional life. He met a married woman named Pamela Colino on a movie set, and he fell in love with her. Both individually and publicly, their connection sparked a scandal. Everyone who found out was startled to learn that he even shared a home with Pamela and her husband for a while. James and Pamela hurried to get married in Nevada after her husband eventually filed for divorce, but the timing sparked a flurry of bigamy rumors. His reputation was harmed by the secrecy surrounding his union, but their relationship remained strong in spite of the consequences. His passion occasionally drove him to risky extremes on set. He insisted on doing his own stunts while I Met a Murderer was being filmed. He was severely injured in a car accident that sent him plummeting off a precipice. He concealed his broken wrist under a coat and continued filming that same day, refusing to receive the necessary medical attention. Throughout his career, he carried the physical reminder of the injury, which never completely healed. James made a decision that divided many when the conflict started. He registered as a conscientious objector after declining military duty. Some studios wouldn't hire him, and newspapers called him a coward. During the Blitz, however, he chose to drive ambulances rather than flee, risking his life each night to rescue survivors from flaming debris. His service did little to appease his detractors, despite the fact that it was riskier than many combat duties. Nevertheless, those months of unrelenting labor demonstrated a distinct kind of bravery that never quite fit the mold of what the general public expected. Everything changed with The Man in Grey in 1943. James became a star after persuading the director to let him to portray the antagonist rather than the hero. People flocked to theaters to see him because of how powerful his performance was, rejoicing when his character's fate was ultimately met. James Mason became one of the most talked about performers in Britain as a result of the movie, which also shattered box office records. There was more to James Mason's ascent to prominence with The Seventh Veil in 1945 than merely a landmark performance. For British film, it was a watershed moment. Despite having a modest budget of less than $100,000, the movie shocked the industry. By making over $2 million globally by 1948 and more than $253,000 in the UK alone. Mason's profit-sharing arrangement added even more significance to the tale. According to reports, he was given $20,000, which was a substantial amount at the time and would now be close to $800,000. The movie's success was astounding. It attracted nearly 18 million admissions and even outsold Gone with the Wind in some regions of the United Kingdom. The sad story of a domineering music instructor and his pianist ward enthralled audiences. Mason's deep and nuanced persona resonated so strongly that it influenced the development of a new type of charismatic yet ethically dubious leading man. The project had just as much turmoil behind the camera. One of the most talked about rivalries in movie history developed between Mason and co-star Todd. Their work-related arguments swiftly escalated into violent altercations that made weekly headlines. Despite their infamous on-set clashes, Mason startled industry insiders by insisting Todd should be given equal billing. He allegedly tore up a script in front of the crew at one angry moment. Their peculiar combination of stability and volatility was aptly described by the press as cement and dynamite. Ironically, those who recognized parallels to that actual struggle in the plot found the suspense to be much more captivating. The tale was further stoked when Todd revealed years later that she and Mason had an affair while shooting. Despite his victory, Mason had to deal with a terrible setback. Despite receiving a lot of accolades from American reviewers for Odd Man Out and The Seventh Veil, he was not included in the Academy Awards nominees in 1947. Mason was declared ineligible due to a technical restriction that disqualified films that were initially released in Britain. It was a horrible irony. Although the film's main guy garnered nothing, it did win an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. Mason carried the scar for many years, claiming it was an obvious indication of prejudice against foreigners. He never forgot the pain of that initial rejection at the pinnacle of his career, even though he went on to receive 3 Oscar nominations. He was also accompanied off-screen by controversy. He departed Britain for Hollywood in 1947, at a time when the country was reeling from post-war hardship. The explanation was straightforward yet quite unpopular. Because of the high tax rate in Britain, Mason was in danger of losing practically all of his earnings. He would have kept a small portion of his earnings, which were close to $100,000. The people saw his action as self-serving, and newspapers accused him of deserting his nation during its hour of need. It was made worse by the fact that American studios were removing British films due to currency limitations at the same time. Mason never entirely recovered his reputation at home, and the timing could not have been worse. Additionally, he had a talent for drawing odd headlines. He acquired a lion cub from a circus charity that was having financial difficulties in 1946. Neighbors were initially amused by the animals wandering around his Surrey estate, but as the cub developed into a 200-pound predator, the humor soon subsided. The silence was broken by its incessant roaring. Additionally, it escaped during a thunderstorm one night, frightening the neighbors until it was apprehended hours later with the assistance of London Zoo specialists. After the lion interrupted a garden party and terrified guests fled for their lives, complaints escalated into a full-fledged legal battle. Mason was ultimately compelled to pay damages and move the animal. However, the tale haunted him for years as a reminder of how celebrity can occasionally degenerate into ridiculousness. Mason was still able to revive his career in spite of the controversies and failures. After securing the position of General Rommel in The Desert Fox, he inked a long-term contract with 20th Century Fox in 1951. The deal helped him regain his reputation in Hollywood and guaranteed him consistent employment. He played Norman Maine, a fading actor whose tragic decline revealed Mason's depth and vulnerability as a performer, opposite Judy Garland in A Star Is Born a few years later. His status as one of the most versatile actors of his day was cemented when the movie became a classic. By 1959, Mason had returned to the limelight with his role as the dapper and threatening Philip Van Damme in Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest. His portrayal demonstrated his ability to combine charm with terror on screen, becoming one of Hollywood's most iconic antagonists. James Mason made a purchase in 1949 that would alter the course of cinema history as well as his own life. For roughly $82,000, he purchased a magnificent residence in Beverly Hills that had once belonged to Buster Keaton. The property had been built in the 1920s for $300,000. Unwanted in a time when large, historic homes were out of style, the estate had been on the market for years. Mason was first hesitant since he was aware of the expenses involved in maintaining a 20-room estate with elaborate ceilings and expansive grounds, even if his wife Pamela loved the Italian villa. However, he ultimately consented, securing one of the most amazing deals in Hollywood history. From Marlene Dietrich to Cary Grant, the home had hosted many well-known visitors, but nobody could have foreseen the mystery it was concealing. Workers discovered a fake wall in a little shed behind the property a few years later while doing standard renovations. When they succeeded, they discovered reels of nitrate film that had been stored for many years. Everyone was astounded by what they discovered. Buster Keaton's lost masterpieces, such as a full copy of The General and the long-lost The Boat, were included in the reels. Not just any old prints, either. Because they were kept in settings that should have destroyed them long ago, they were among the few copies that still exist today. The workshop, which Keaton had constructed himself, served as a private storage facility for his films. These treasures may have been lost forever if Mason hadn't found them. Mason was aware of the risk involved with neglecting the nitrate reels. They were already degrading and extremely combustible. He immediately contacted Raymond Rohauer, a preservationist. The films had to be saved through a difficult and expensive method. Mason paid $5,000 to have them reproduced onto safer film stock, which was a significant sum in the early 1950s. Instead of hiding them or possibly destroying them, he gave the originals to the Library of Congress. Mason's decision saved some of the best silent comedy films for future generations at a time when many studios were throwing away outdated reels. But it wasn't all that easy. Mason was contested by Keaton's widow, who said the films belonged to her late husband's personal belongings and ought to have gone through the estate. The legal battle might have continued for years. Mason, however, made a private agreement to avoid the legal struggle. In return for her giving away any future claims, he offered her 2 reels. In addition to saving him many legal fees, this amicable agreement made sure the films wouldn't vanish into closed disputes. Common reason won out in this rare instance, enabling everyone to enjoy Keaton's brilliance. The effects were both immediate and long-lasting. Using the films Mason had saved, a significant retrospective of Keaton's work was held at the Museum of Modern Art in 1957. The occasion helped ignite the current drive to preserve and research vintage films, and critics and viewers were reminded of the genius of silent humor. Mason's discovery demonstrated that even lost films could be recovered, which fueled searches that would ultimately save thousands more. What had once been regarded as disposable entertainment was now seen as art, and academics started closely analyzing Keaton's craft and filmmakers took inspiration from the rediscovered masterpieces. Mason's life, however, was anything but tranquil outside of this amazing revelation. Once passionate, his marriage to Pamela descended into a public scandal and a whirlpool of accusations. By the early 1960s, their arguments had reached the headlines, with Mason accusing him of adultery and Pamela accusing him of cruelty. He lost millions of dollars as a result of their protracted and costly divorce. Intimate details of their lives were revealed in courtrooms, ranging from alarming accusations of jealousy and fury to harsh battles over money. Both of them suffered from the effects even after it was over, with Mason withdrawing abroad and later acknowledging that the marriage had been his biggest regret. The ensuing custody dispute only made matters worse. Portland, their 14-year-old daughter, was made to testify about their home life, including ridiculous conflicts that frequently revolved around which parent a family dog preferred. Over 20 pets were owned by the couple. and even their custody turned into a dispute. Months passed throughout the court proceedings, and Mason briefly escaped to Europe with the kids before being compelled to return. The public was appalled by reports of broken vases, flying debris, and hurt dogs, which depicted a chaotic home. The children were eventually given shared custody, but the harm had already been done. While Morgan battled addiction and frequently cited those years as the cause of his problems, Portland grew up determined to leave Hollywood. Mason's personal struggles also included his own harmful addictions, as if that weren't enough. Between the late 1950s and the early 1960s, he lost around $750,000 at Monte Carlo casinos as a result of his addiction to high-stakes gambling. He also pawned his Golden Globe Award to settle debts at the height of his addiction, only to buy it back days later at a far higher price. He ignored pals like Alfred Hitchcock's entreaties to quit playing baccarat, where he wagered fortunes and occasionally played for days on end. With a trail of debts, sold houses, and rumors of suicide attempts, the addiction almost destroyed his finances and his emotional well-being. Nevertheless, despite his struggles, Mason directed his energy towards animal rights, an unexpected cause. He gave an incredible $100,000 in 1968 to support the establishment of the World Society for the Protection of Animals American chapter. Years before, he had seen a vicious dogfight during a movie shoot, which sparked his sympathy. In addition to housing dozens of animals on his properties and saving strays, he vigorously opposed animal abuse in circuses and laboratories. He provided funding for clinics, testified before Congress, and even adopted elephants to protect them from exploitation. He was one of the first celebrities to devote their name and wealth to animal welfare, and his commitment predated the trend of celebrity activism. Mason's private diaries, which were made public after his passing, showed yet another side of him that was characterized by hopelessness and insecurity. He described times when, depressed by loneliness, debt, and failed careers, he thought of taking his own life. He acknowledged his excessive sleeping medication use, acute peer jealousy, and overpowering feelings of invisibility. As he started to see roles go by, fans were taken aback by these diaries, which revealed a guy whose outward elegance and charm concealed serious battles with addiction and melancholy. Although James Mason was renowned for his grace on film, his late career decisions demonstrated the extent to which he was prepared to sacrifice himself for his art. Mason agreed to a $100,000 pay cut when Stanley Kubrick gave him the part of Humbert Humbert in Lolita in 1962 so that the movie could go under the careful scrutiny of stringent American censors. For a celebrity of his caliber, it was a shocking sacrifice, but Kubrick had little wiggle room due to the contentious topics of the book. Kubrick moved the film away from explicit content and towards psychological tension, producing a plot that was provocative yet restrained. Nevertheless, following its June 1962 premiere, the movie was banned in a number of nations. To comprehend the extent of Humbert's addiction, he read Nabokov's book 15 times and met with psychologists. In order to hone delicate facial expressions and gestures that might convey desire without going against the rules on set, he also set up private sessions with Sue Lyon, the 14-year-old cast member playing Lolita. Although Mason's attitude was extremely professional, Lyon later remarked that it made her uneasy. Producer James B. Harris was suspected of wrongdoing behind the scenes, allegedly having a covert connection with Lyon after filming concluded. Mason brought his typical intensity to the set. Peter Sellers, who portrayed the quirky Claire Quilty, was a close collaborator of his, improvising lines as Kubrick captured the erratic energy with various cameras. As a result, Kubrick's technique veered more towards the weird, while Mason's performance grounded the movie by shocking viewers by giving a horrific figure a surprisingly human quality. To achieve the ideal ratio of hopelessness to restraint, a scene from Humbert's breakdown was res-hot a dozen times. An example of Mason's perseverance. Despite the movie's meager box office earnings, Mason's performance was hailed by critics for lasting long after the credits had rolled. Reactions to the part were intense. His reputation for taking chances that few prominent men would have dared was solidified by the hundreds of messages accusing him of praising perversion. Mason pushed the envelope once again in Georgie Girl, which came out a few years later. 1966, Mason turned a part that hardly took up 7 pages in the script, playing James Leamington, an older guy pursuing a much younger woman, into the most memorable performance in the movie. He included purposeful pauses, extended silences, and spontaneous comments that made the audience cringe. The script was already deemed one of the most immoral they had ever read by the British censors. And Mason's decisions just made things more uncomfortable. The plot was both eerie and engrossing because of his relationship with Lynn Redgrave, who portrayed the innocent Georgie. Mason demonstrated his dedication to parts he believed in by agreeing to reduce his price once more. Critics praised his performance, noting that he was able to transform a silent moment into something more impactful than dialogue, and he was nominated for an Oscar and a Golden Globe. Mason demonstrated the same commitment off-screen. He did the voice of Captain Nemo for the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ride at Disneyland in 1959. He insisted on filming at 3 a.m. inside a small, fictitious submarine in order to convey the sensation of being stranded beneath the ocean. To make his voice more genuine, he even tried on a diving suit off the coast of California. His remarks reverberated through the undersea voyage for years, and park visitors were unaware that they were coming from Mason. Later, when Paul Newman's career was in decline, Mason utilized his power to land the lead part in The Verdict, 1982. Mason served as a mentor both on and off screen, often spending late nights playing chess and talking strategy in Newman's trailer. In addition to enabling Newman provide one of his best performances to date, his portrayal of a crafty defense lawyer garnered him another Oscar nod. His legacy has extended to television. His narration of the 1972 BBC miniseries The Search for the Nile attracted millions of viewers and demonstrated that well-known people might give television a serious tone. The show received a Peabody and an Emmy. Mason's voice was praised by critics for giving history a sense of urgency and vitality. The Shooting Party, which was shot in 1984, included Mason's last performance. On the brink of World War I, he took up the part after another actor was hurt and gave a stirring performance as a man holding on to dwindling customs. Mason passed away at the age of 75 from a heart attack a few months later. The following year saw the release of the movie, and the London Critics' Circle awarded him Actor of the Year posthumously. James Mason made decisions throughout his career that frequently astounded viewers and reviewers, whether it was reducing his pay, accepting awkward jobs, or unexpectedly redefining himself. A startling tale regarding James Mason's legacy surfaced in 1985. Mason and his wife, Pamela, had purchased a stately home that had belonged to Buster Keaton back in 1952. The 10,000 square-foot Italian-style home was surrounded by 42 palm trees and had unique features including a mosaic-tiled Roman-style pool and a mechanized trout stream. At the time, Mason was unaware that a film vault concealed within the house held some of Keaton's long-lost two genuine comedies from the 1920s. It contained prints of classics such as Cops, The Boat, The Playhouse, and The Balloon Attic, which were believed to have vanished following Keaton's financial and professional downfall in the 1930s. Reels worth more than Mason had spent for the entire property were discovered when he drilled open the vault. Later, these films were kept and restored, and Keaton's fame received a much-needed boost thanks to the discovery. This story reappeared after Mason's death in 1984, shocking the business. Records never supported rumors that Chaplin wrote letters complimenting Mason's efforts, but the fact was sufficient in and of itself. Mason and Chaplin both made contributions to silent film, and their ashes were interred in Switzerland near Chaplin's mausoleum. In the years following Mason's passing, rumors of his missing voice also surfaced. Mason criticized Hollywood's hypocrisy after some reported that a 90-minute cassette with the label "Do Not Play" had been discovered in 1994. Mason's actual words were preserved in interviews and publications that told a similar scenario, but no such tape has ever been confirmed. In an interview on his performance in Lolita in 1981, he clarified that, contrary to popular belief, the movie was not a shameful work of exploitation, but a romantic tale influenced by the restrictions Hollywood studios imposed on contentious subjects. He publicly discussed the double standard he has witnessed for decades, the way big companies frequently suppressed films while still making money off of their popularity. Mason disclosed how frequently he declined assignments when studios attempted to confine him in his 1985 posthumous autobiography, Before I Forget, and how his career in America had almost ended in the 1940s while he was performing in politically controversial pictures. He also talked about the brutality he saw against celebrities like Judy Garland, recalling how Warner Brothers abandoned her after filming A Star is Born and drove her to the limit. Audio recordings of Mason discussing these topics, which have been saved in archives and occasionally auctioned off, have preserved his viewpoint and served as a reminder to subsequent generations that he had never shied away from criticizing the shortcomings of the industry. Scholars started to view Mason's career differently. Numerous studies have highlighted his true versatility, even though some official rating reports cannot be confirmed. He transitioned between genres with ease during his more than 150 film career, starting with gripping dramas like The Seventh Veil. It was a movie office hit in Britain in the 1940s, followed by big-budget adventures like Journey to the Center of the Earth and thrillers like Hitchcock's North by Northwest. Critics noted that he had a unique ability that maintained him in demand for decades, the ability to effortlessly go from a sweet romantic lead to a terrifying villain. Despite never having received an Academy Award, his nuance and emotional depth in roles in films like Lolita and A Star is Born were studied. According to recent evaluations, his fame will only increase as more of his work is seen and saved, particularly because of contemporary technology that makes older films more widely available.